Hello and happy Friday. Happy New Year's Eve. Thanks for tuning in to RadioFreeRhinecliff.org and this show in particular. Correct me if I'm Norm. I'm your host, Norm, and I'm just so excited tonight to have Amy and Richard Hutchings. What are you laughing about? Look at somebody didn't like my intro.
I loved
Somebody
it.
found it very amusing. Now,
That's my kind of humor.
It's not supposed to be funny, Richard.
Happy New Year.
I always thought you were
New Year.
normal.
Yeah, well, I'm normal-ish.
Norman, I mean.
Yeah. So Amy and Richard are just amazing, wonderful people. And, I've known them for a number of years. I knew Amy first. She's a casting agent. She casts everything here in the Hudson Valley. And Richard is a photographer. And not everything, but many wonderful things. And Richard's a wonderful photographer.
Thank you.
And a couple of years ago, I was delighted to be invited to their 50th wedding anniversary. Is that correct? 50, 5-0?
Yes.
I can't remember.
Yeah, smart. And that's just, I find that to be such an amazing feat to be married that long. How did you two meet?
Well,
They're looking at each other.
Well, I like big stories, but I also
Yeah, good.
I like big circles.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm going to tell the story, but I'm also going to tell a circle about it as well.
Okay.
So, and I'm also going to do it at my timing, not Amy's. So
If it gets boring,
we
I'll
met-
just scream summarize, okay?
We met because Amy was driving a bunch of us to an SDS convention, which is Students for a Democratic Society, which was one of the, left-wing organizations in the 60s. And we were going to a convention in Princeton, New Jersey. So on the way down, I don't know that I can really tell this story the way
Well,
that
you started. Yeah,
Well,
now you got to
so
finish.
At any rate, on the way down, Amy pulled out a joint that she had rolled, and we all proceeded to get so stoned.
Wait, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but marijuana wasn't legal back then, right?
No. In fact, very
Just
little of anything
Wanted to
was.
put a fine point on that. So
so
Amy pulled out a huge Bob Marley joint, and
That's
you
right.
had not met prior to this.
No, we hadn't.
Okay.
And she talked nonstop all the way to New Jersey, and I fell in love in the car. Of course, I also was incredibly stoned. So, but when we got there, we parked, and then we spent the whole day
Parked
together.
like you made out in the car?
No,
that kind of parking?
No, we just parked like somewhere in front of a building somewhere. At any rate, instead of going to the convention, we walked around looking for it, and we couldn't find it. And so we just blew it off and instead spent the whole day visiting and talking and having a great time. And then we met up with the other two people who had gone to the convention, and we all realized that nobody had paid attention to where the car was parked. So for the next 4 hours, we went walking around Princeton looking for the car.
Oh, geez.
We finally found the car, and this is the other circle. Fast forward to my son getting his PhD from Princeton, and we went there for a little...
Proud parent just dropping that in.
Yeah, well, it's only because that's where we parked, was in Princeton.
Yeah, I get it.
And when we got there, he wanted to show us his office and go out and have dinner with us and stuff. So we got there and we parked, and I realized that where we parked in front of this building was exactly where we had lost our car 40 years earlier. So
That's hilarious.
hence the big circle.
And it was your car, Amy? What kind of car was it?
it was a green Volkswagen Beetle.
And so 4 people is about all you could fit in there.
There were 4 people.
But how did
3.5.
How did you come to be together in that car? The mutual friends were in the back seat?
Well, Richard was in the back seat, and it's
Okay.
a good thing we got there because we were just looking at each other in the rearview mirror the whole entire trip.
And you're driving.
Yeah.
You were like, he's cute.
He was really cute.
And I like the way he giggles.
Anyhow, that was...
But so the mutual friends said, oh, we're going to this thing. And can we bring our friend Richard?
Right.
Okay.
And I had just I had hitchhiked to New York a year earlier, so I had no friends, and I was living in a cardboard box in Tompkins
so
Square Park.
pathetic. He only
And I
liked me
had
from my car.
one ratty jacket.
I
and-
remember that cardboard box.
Yeah, it was
Tompkins
a
Square
classic.
Park. What year was this? Like 70 something?
1967.
So I can only imagine how rough Tompkins Square Park must have been back then.
Well, actually, it wasn't quite. We were living on Elizabeth Street, which was in
Wasn't called Soho at the time.
and-
It was,
Right.
and that was also where I was given introduction to my first mafia people, because John Gotti was the head of a club right around the corner.
I remember those
Amy's
clubs.
afraid that I'm going to get killed.
No, I
That-
remember people pointing out those clubs and be like, okay, I'm not going to
They
light
were
off a cherry bomb in front
They
of
were
the.
very, very nice. They were very respectful. to
Well,
us.
the word always was that those were some of the safest blocks in the city
Yes.
because they didn't want any
Italian.
outsiders.
Yeah.
For Italians. And are you of Italian descent?
No.
All right, where did you hitchhike to New York City from?
from Idaho.
Idaho.
Yes, having
There's no
been-
Italians in Idaho, right?
There are.
Despite
There
it
are
being a state that
19.
ends in a vowel.
But growing up as a Mormon in
19.
Idaho,
Oh, sorry.
there was like not, I didn't really have any kind of Italianese. I didn't understand the culture or anything. So when I moved into this little apartment, the guy in the grocery store pulled me into the back of the grocery store at one time and said, I need to tell you that you're not from around here and you don't really understand the culture. So I have to point out a couple of things for you, for your own safety. Number one, don't talk to Joey. Joey Gallo lived in the building, and Frankie Gallo lived in the building, and Joe Gallo, the Murder Incorporated, was
Right.
his brother.
Amy's smacking you. She's like, they're going to track you down, Richard.
She's such a coward.
52 years of marriage
I know,
down the
this
drain.
guy's been dead for 50 years. I don't think he can do much.
Yeah. Wow, well, that's sweet of this guy to sort of give you the lay of the land.
It was incredibly sweet,
He
and
weighed-
from
he
then
weighed
on, I did avoid the
140
guy.
Pounds. He was like this.
Richard did.
Yes. Richard weighed
He's skinny.
140.
Yeah, but I was very
used to weigh
fast.
140 pounds. Very fast. That's good. So you just sort of dropped this in a sentence. Growing up Mormon, that's Utah, and it's Salt Lake City. But Idaho is near Utah. Is that the sort of spill over this big Mormon population?
It's a
Absolutely.
suburb of Utah for Mormons.
A suburb of Utah. Nice. And was that? I mean, that must have been an interesting. Are you still Mormon?
No,
Okay.
no, but most of my family still is. And,
And are they still in Idaho?
yeah, most of them are the ones who are.
And he's got about 1,500 cousins from one family in Salt Lake City.
I believe it.
Yeah, yeah. It's
And
interesting.
do you get back there and visit the relatives very often?
I've been avoiding it recently with COVID and the insurrection.
The insurrection. And which side of that are they on? Now, these are the people you should be careful of. Not
me about
not
it.
the
Oh, yes.
deceased mobsters, but the living relatives. That's much more dangerous.
Yeah,
know.
there are a few that are.
We've been unfriended more times.
Oh boy! So you were raised Mormon, and it's a Christian sect, right?
Yeah.
And did you at some point decide that was not for you? And did that coincide with hitchhiking east?
Yeah, I mean, I think that basically my leaving Idaho was recognizing that that the search that I was on went beyond those borders, and
Right.
I had a real problem with the fact that the Mormon Church right then was exclusionary. It was it excluded Black and Hispanic people, and my life has been all about inclusion. I think Amy and my lives together has been all about inclusion. So
Right.
Not to
Yeah, that's-
not to take the deep dive off of.
Oh, come on, dive
the
away.
cliff of seriousness.
We have a
but-
whole hour here.
Well, that's a big deal to us. That's a really big deal to us. And just to tell you, just to get back to it, the reason why we're together for 54 years is because we have absolutely nothing in common. Nothing.
Except for that.
And these three boys
A
that we
commitment to living an inclusive life and making the world a more inclusive place, I guess.
Living creative lives and
Right.
allowing each other to live creative lives and giving each other all of the room necessary to do that. So,
Right.
and it wasn't always convenient, or fun.
So while
for Amy.
I was I started at Sesame Street right out of school, and Richard at the time was doing photography for Scholastic, and he just got for Scholastic magazines. He just got this assignment to do a picture of two teenage couples in a coffee shop. So he found these models, and he did the picture, and the president of the company, Maurice Robinson, who founded Scholastic, called him in, and there's Richard in his cut-off jeans and his long stringy hair, thinking he's going to be fired right then and there. And Maurice holds up this picture, and it was a black couple and a white couple. And he said, "Richard, why did you do this?" They had never before shown a child or a person of color in any of their publications. And, it was like he said, it didn't even occur to me. They were just these beautiful kids.
Right.
And Maurice said, "I like this. Let's do more of this." And, as the years went on and we were doing, photography, and, of course, Sesame Street was so radically inclusive. It was just so beautiful.
Yeah.
That sort of became our hallmark. Every photograph that we did for textbooks and books that we wrote, everything had to do with having differently abled people and
Right.
people of color, and just a whole rainbow. So that's been a really important aspect, and I do bring that to my casting.
Okay, well, just back up. Where did you come from that you went to Sesame Street, which was in New York City, right?
It was in New York City, yeah. I when I graduated from college, there was a freeze on city jobs, so I couldn't get a teaching job. I couldn't blah, blah, blah. And somebody said to me, "There's this new TV show that's starting, and they need a script typist."
A script typist.
And
That's
I
great.
was a really fast typist.
And where was college?
Well, I finished up. I went to a few different schools. I ended up getting my degree from Pace College in the city.
Nice.
I needed to be in New York for something. My father had just died, and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. You were from New York?
Yeah, I'm from Queens.
Queens?
From Flushing.
Flushing.
Little far from Idaho Falls.
Yeah, Idaho Falls.
I thought they were very similar.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So Pace is right there. It's
So
nearby.
Pace was right there, and every my life was in the city at the time, and I just started there the end of '69, just when the show was in their first season.
Show was 2 months old.
It was
Amazing.
amazing. It was amazing, and the guy who hired me said, "We can't promise there's going to be a second season."
Right.
Now I think they're in their 52nd.
Just a spectacular
It's
show.
It really was an amazing experience. So I just, it's funny because when I meet these young kids getting into film now, I always say to them, if you can get a job as the production secretary, as the production manager,
Right.
that is the best place because you see the whole global production from there. That's really. So from there, I moved into the studio, and I was in the studio taking edit notes for many years, and then I started stage managing, and it's just that's what Sesame Street was. It was a workshop. Everybody was growing there. Richard was doing on-air photography, and we would have these celebrities come, and Richard would come and photograph them. And
But Richard was doing on-air photography. I'm guessing you were there in '69. What year was this SDS
that was
thing?
SDS was in around '67.
Okay, so you met prior to going to Sesame Street.
Well, I need to summarize this because in actuality it is a summary. I met her on Saturday. She moved in with me on Monday and never left. And so
That's-
relationship has been ongoing since literally 2 days after we met.
That's funny because one of the people I asked, I said, "Oh, I'm interviewing Richard and Amy, give him some questions." Said, "Ask Amy to tell the story of how they met, and days later she moved in with Richard and started running Richard's life." End quote. And this listener added, "It's an amazing story." You know, I really can't divulge my sources. I think the Supreme Court backs me up on this so far.
Well, so what happened is that I went home to Queens that night. And my sister went into labor the next day, so my mother...
That night, 1967, of the SDS.
Yes, the night I met him. And my sister went into labor, so my mother left to go take care of her.
Mother left the family home in Flushing.
In Flushing, to go to Brooklyn to take care of her grandson. And I stayed up all night reading In Cold Blood.
Oh, my God.
And I scared the
Alone in the house?
Alone in the house.
Reading.
So we had planned to meet the next day, and I said, I'm not going home again.
She came with a suitcase.
Really? Is that how you crazy kids did it in 67?
And I was living with someone, and so Amy walked through the apartment, gathering her stuff together, put it in a suitcase, and put it in the hall. And I said, you know, I love this woman. I'd been trying to figure out how to get rid of this girl. She was a whiner, and I just couldn't.
Whiner.
Amy did the job.
Is this really going to be?
Came in and cleaned house.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
But let me just jump back to Sesame Street for a second, because the thing that was really amazing that we didn't learn for many, many years was that Sesame Street was one of the most revolutionary ideas to come along in terms of education. And Amy literally walked in the door, and they basically invited her to create a career for herself. They just said, you know, if you want to be doing something else, let us know, and we'll move you up. We'll just move you through the... So
It was a workshop.
So 10 years down the road, I mean, along the way, she was offered the international Sesame Street production. So they asked her if she wanted to be the producer of International Sesame. But it was right at the point where we started having children. And she said, you know, if I do this, I'm never going to be home. I'm going to be in Italy or France or, you know, in the Netherlands or wherever I'm building a show, and I'm never going to see my kids. And so that sort of, you know, stalled that. And,
right.
And along the way, there were opportunities that she had that she basically had to turn down in order to be a mom as well as a professional.
It has all worked out perfectly.
Okay.
Except my children.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I've met your children. You have 3 underperforming dullards who are your not very dynamic individuals. Yeah. Who was the first of that batch?
Jacob.
Okay.
March 20th boy.
March 20th, the best day ever to have a birthday. And he's just one of the most genuinely nice people I know.
I would have to agree. He's from the second he was born, he was our best friend.
Yeah.
And he's been raising us ever since.
And who's and what does he do?
Well, Jacob is a photographer, and he was on track to
like Dad.
He got his degree in photography, but he was on track to become a line producer. He was working with
right.
A mutual friend of ours, and he was great, but it was too inconsistent. So he started using his art to rebuild people's homes and do renovations and whatnot. And he really, you know, he brings all of that art to it, and he's a very busy.
Yeah, but
he's very busy.
He also
making people's homes beautiful.
And he also seems to bring those talents to lots of sort of volunteer activities around.
Yeah. His wife is French, and she has brought lots of je ne sais quoi to Rhinebeck. She's really been a wonderful influence here.
Right.
I mean, she was very active in PTA, and you know, our grandchildren went through the school system here, and they flourished. I mean, it's really been a great life.
And how old are their children?
Bethany is 19. She's a sophomore
goodness.
at Wash U in St. Louis, and Benjamin's graduating Rhinebeck High School this year.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it does happen.
Grandparents. All right, so that's Jacob. You have two other
Spencer,
Underachievers.
dullard underachievers.
Spencer's a composer. He's a score composer for feature films.
Right.
And he's a musicologist, so he brings a lot of that.
You know how when you're listening to a piece of music and you go, oh, I can't believe I have no idea who wrote that, but that's beautiful.
Right.
He knows.
Right.
And that's so annoying, but it's so appreciated.
You know, my kids a couple years ago started beating me at Jeopardy. I used to say, I'll give you $2 for every answer you get before Dad. And then one day I was like, all right, you'll get nothing because they just got much better than I. One of them, Allison.
Yep. And that's what you want.
Yeah.
And that's what you want as parents.
Oh, that's exactly what you want.
Yeah.
So he's a musicologist and a composer.
He's a composer.
And he writes music for movies.
Yeah, he's a score
And
composer.
for other things as well.
Yeah.
He
He's doing a dance show for France right now, and
he and his
That
little
must-
brother have written a couple of Broadway shows.
they
Neither of them have been produced yet,
Yet,
but
but
they're
however,
both incredible.
incredible.
There we go. Okay.
Beautiful.
Little brother brings up the third. Who's that?
Well, that's Peter.
Uh-huh.
Peter's a real underachiever.
Yeah, and yet another.
He's a
And not very friendly.
Oh,
Not at all. But
They're really
and
wonderful.
quick
Yeah.
to point out that the place where he parked was where his mother and I had parked.
so at any rate, Peter's a film director and a screenwriter,
But
and his most recent film
yeah, lay it on us.
has just come out. It's called The Hating Game, and we shot it in where did we shoot it? In Saugerties.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and Kingston and surrounds, and it's wonderful.
I saw the
So
preview. It
uplifting, so
looks
uplifting.
amazing.
Yes.
It really
It's really
looks.
fun.
It's really, really fun.
Well, hats off. And he's the one who got the PhD down there at Princeton?
Yes. Yes.
And what
Which
was
he
the...
doesn't like to talk about.
He doesn't like to
except-
talk
Well,
We're
he's
not allowed
not.
to brag.
He's not here, is he? Oh, you're not allowed to brag. Yeah, that's going to happen. And what did he get a PhD in?
Comparative literature.
Right. So So did he write that movie as well?
He didn't write that movie, but he has written several others. And Christina Mengert wrote the Hating Game. She's
And-
another very talented.
If people want to watch it, as I do, how can they see The Hating Game?
Right now, it's streaming on pay-per-view.
Okay.
But it's wonderful.
So anything on demand. If you go on demand, new releases, that's where it is.
Right.
Any
And
of
they
those
had-
channels.
yeah, they
But I
had
think
fun. So Peter directed it. Spencer wrote the score. So they worked together really.
Just
closely.
amazing.
It's
Now,
really fun.
and all three of your boys, I checked, have credits on IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, as do you two. What are you making a face for?
Because it's so, because I feel actually, cause I've been working in film for 10 years,
Right.
and I feel really humble about it. For all of us, that we've had this opportunity to all of a sudden explode into working in film and doing films that, film has the greatest influence worldwide of disseminating our culture.
Right.
And so much of it is dark and negative, and we're trying to really do some wonderful, uplifting films, and that feels really good. But also just to be working in that industry and getting people work, and crazy people who want to be actors, like
Freaks. Yeah.
well, these films are more about love than they are about fear, which is the opposite of love. And we live in a time where we need more love and less fear. So,
Well, hats off to that. And one of the things you said, leaving Idaho and leaving the church, that I really liked, you said, well, it wasn't expansive enough for where I wanted to go. It wasn't, I didn't like this, I didn't like that, I didn't agree with this. It was sort of the opposite of that. And that
the puppy, yeah.
feels sort of
well,
like
even
love.
though, all of my relatives, back 300 years, they were all in America. And some of them came here from England to join the church. So these people were pioneers. I mean, these are the people that dragged a wheelbarrow from St. Louis to Salt Lake, Utah, where there were no roads, and there were people shooting arrows at them. And I mean, incredible courage and motivation. But what I recognized, and I sort of had some people point this out to me, so it made sense when I saw it emotionally myself, was that one of the things that had happened in Mormonism is that the church had become, in my estimation, too much about the money.
Right.
That all Mormons in good standing, and I'm not denigrating because a lot of the principles of Mormonism I think are really valid and beautiful, but anytime a religion becomes more of a business than a spiritual guide, it starts to lose its spiritual value.
So many of them do. Let me just ask one last question before we take a break here.
Yeah.
You said dragging a wheelbarrow, and I know there's a lot of sort of Mormon lore.
Hand
What's that?
They were schlepping hand carts.
Schlepping hand carts.
Schlepping.
That's the Flushing version of dragging a wheelbarrow.
The Polish Flushing.
Is that a part of some specific lore, or are you just sort of speaking?
No. I mean, that's what they did.
They walked.
They walked pushing a handcart or pulling a handcart, because if you couldn't afford an oxen or an animal to pull your cart, or horses to pull your wagon, your covered wagon, then you had to just drag it along yourself.
You can say schlep. That's fine.
I do say schlep.
So, and where were they going to? How did they know when they got there?
They were following.
Why?
They were following leaders of the Mormon Church then, Brigham Young.
Gotcha.
I mean, not that this is a whole thing about Mormonism, and I apologize if it sounds like it, but Joseph Smith, who was like the first prophet in Mormonism, also had a number of people that watched out for him and protected him, and among those were some of my relatives. So they were involved with the church early on, like it was originated in 1830. So they were involved from the very, very beginning.
So did that give you a certain stature in the church, that your relatives were there at the get-go?
So that even now, even though I am not a member in good standing, I doubt that the church would ever excommunicate me, even though I did marry a Jew.
No.
Wait
a minute. Let's talk about that. But are you still a Christian?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So that's wonderful. So,
but not for the same reasons that my brother is or my sisters are.
Right. And your children, were your children raised in any religion?
Nope.
They were raised with awareness, then
they were just raised with a sense.
And they're learners.
Parents who had an emphasis on love and inclusion
totally.
And that's
faith
not
and hope,
bad.
And they got it.
And got it. They're very grounded.
Well, I'll drink to that. And everybody noticed that's the clumsy segue, as is the tradition here on Correct Me If I'm Wrong. The guests brought in a cocktail. And today, you can start opening this up if you want. They brought in a mimosa. There's a bottle of prosecco.
We're making believe it's breakfast.
Making believe it's breakfast.
It's New Year's lunch.
Yeah.
Brunch.
Well, so that's wonderful. I can't wait. And, it's champagne-ish stuff, prosecco.
I have a good story.
Well, let's hear that while Richard's pouring us some cocktails.
So, one of my producers contacted me and asked me, she was going to the second season of an HBO show or Showtime show, one of them, called Couples Therapy. And she asked me whether or not I knew of any couples who might want to
there it is.
part of this.
I hope we heard the cork pop on air. That was nice.
All right.
A little New Year's Eve spectacle.
So I said to her, you might consider having an older couple, because of course all they want were couples in their 20s and 30s and 40s with, dysfunctional relationships.
Makes for good TV.
Yeah, makes for good TV. So she said, do you think you and Richard would want to audition for this? And I thought, well, that would be a goof, whatever.
Yeah.
So in order to be auditioned, we had to go and sit in a therapist's office and talk about all of our problems.
That was your audition?
That was our audition.
All right. Well, first, cheers to being together 54 years, raising actually wonderful, personable boys. Well, as far as I can tell.
To men, yeah.
Yeah, into men.
They are.
Cheers.
Quite amazing.
Now, what did now you said L'chaim. Did somebody say that?
No, I said L'chaim.
Oh, well, look, I'm from Cincinnati.
And
I can't do that. And what do the Mormons say
I said Sid helfen für Teuken Bankas.
Oh boy, that sounds
Yiddish.
okay.
It means it helps like putting suction cups on a dead person.
It means what? All right, come on.
It means it helps like putting suction cups on a dead person.
It
helps.
helps.
As in it's futile.
Okay.
Can
we hear that one more time for all my listeners who
Mormons.
speak Yiddish? Yeah.
Oh, listen, my Yiddish was
God.
the only thing that convinced her Israeli relatives that I wasn't a Nazi.
Oh boy.
He opened up
You
with
know.
that. Anyhow, so here we were in the
Yes,
therapist's
sorry.
office in Brooklyn,
Love that.
being auditioned, and she just was picking and prodding and trying to find problems. And she finally said to Richard, she said, "How does it make you feel that Amy's now the breadwinner in the family?" And Richard said, "I love it."
Yeah.
Like, it just exploded with, he schlepped cameras around. One of his shoulders is like this from schlepping, these heavy cameras around for 50 years. So we didn't have any problems for them. They didn't accept
They
us.
passed.
They
They're like,
passed
oh,
on
these
us.
people get some.
For good
really.
television.
You should have gone in and like sort of made up some problems, like
Well,
complain
We
about
tried.
this. You tried. All right. What did you plan ahead of time? Seriously?
We laughed. I laughed at inappropriate moments.
Smart. That
It
sounds
was-
pretty good.
Oh my God! What a lifetime.
Amy pretended to have a.
Can we get back to the mafia?
Amy, yeah, absolutely. Was it there's some movie where this guy keeps talking about? Oh no, it was a documentary I saw where this guy kept talking about the mobs. It was a documentary on the movie Deep Throat, which was cleverly entitled, Inside Deep Throat. And the guy was talking about the mob influence in the porn business, and his wife kept saying, "Stop! They're going to come and get you. They're going to come and get you," which is what Amy's doing right now.
Yeah, no, she's really nervous about that because
Well,
Well, see, there you should have shared this with the therapist in the casting couch. though.
I tried, but she was shushing me.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think I would have cast you
Well,
just on that
everything I
alone.
talk about is dangerous, and everything she talks about is adorable.
So where was your apartment that she moved into in
It was on
1967?
Elizabeth
on
Street.
Elizabeth
Oh, right,
And
Elizabeth.
at midnight, every night, a bomb in a car would go off. We always knew when it was midnight. It was just perfect. It was like right at midnight.
A bomb in a car?
Well, we were on a border. The Italian neighborhood was on a border with the Hispanic neighborhood. And do you remember West Side Story? Well, this is sort of like a variation
There's a
on
little bit of
this.
a war going on.
There was a little bit of fighting going on about parking spaces, and
It was pre-Soho.
who
I mean,
owned
that's
which-
how long
Right.
ago that was. It
Right.
was, yeah.
but it was the building that we moved into. Martin Scorsese's family lived in that same building and had just moved out. So I came an inch away from like meeting him. And he probably would have told me the same thing, like, don't talk to Frankie.
Right. Just
Frankie
don't
is
look at
nuts.
Frankie.
Frankie
even-
ended up getting.
Amy's going apoplectic here. You're going to get us all killed.
That's right. I think the Frankies. I think that the organization.
Hiding out in Rhinebeck.
Yeah, you guys are actually in some witness protection program. And now you just outed yourself.
You know what? This is
way to go, Richard.
This is not the way to go.
Yeah. So how long did you live there? he said, definitely changing the...
Let me see. I think until the first murder, and then we left because she got nervous.
You want to tell us who did that first murder? You want to put a finger on him right now?
It's really true, though. The police came up to our apartment, knocking on the door to see if we knew anything about this person who had just been murdered across the street. So there we were, all of these hippies living in this building together, and we're passing the grass from one building through the air shaft to the next, to the people of the next
So the cops don't.
There were on our floor. There were 8 apartments, and you heard 8 toilets flushing as this
Like a Cheech and Chong skit. It really is.
You know what?
They even knew. The guy walked. They had the peephole. You'd walk over to the peephole, and everybody looked like it was like a fisheye lens. And I walked over and I peeked out through the peephole, and the cop was standing there dour, like, oh boy, did he need
more
this,
freaking
right?
hippies.
And instead, he puts his badge right up to the thing, and I will never forget that, this humongous badge. And then he said, "We're not here because of the pot." Says, "Do you think we can't smell it?"
Really? That's hilarious.
So then we moved to the East Village, where Richard accidentally got stabbed. So we didn't like that. So we moved.
Wait a minute. We're not just breezing past that. How did you accidentally get stabbed?
So much
and
fun.
whoever doesn't accidentally get stabbed?
I was photographing a diverse couple.
Like a sociopath and a psychopath?
Yes, something like that. I mean, they were, and this guy.
All right, let's not tell this story.
Well, no, I mean it doesn't matter. There was a positive. The positives come out of every story, and the positive that came out of
his attitude
is that the next day, I realized that this guy stabbed me, and I basically stood there and watched it happen without doing anything. And I realized that all the studying and all the stuff that I had been doing had made me become so intellectualized that I had forgotten how to act when it was appropriate. So the next day, I signed up for a Taekwondo school that was around the corner from us. And Amy took it as well. And so we studied Taekwondo for the next 3.5 years. And I got my black belt. Amy got her brown belt. But more importantly, we studied with the guy who was a 10th degree Korean black belt, who had gotten his 10th degree in Korea, who was a phenomenal teacher. And one of the students that I got my black belt with was Garrett Morris, who was one of the original cast in Saturday Night Live.
Who let me just digress, who did one of my very favorite sketches ever on Saturday Night Live. I think Chevy Chase was doing Weekend Update, and he said, now with News for the Hard of Hearing is the director of like whatever school for the deaf, Garrett Morris. You remember this?
No.
And Chevy Chase said, today's top story, and Garrett Morris said, today's top story. And it went on like that for a couple of minutes. It was so absurd and beautiful.
It was absurd.
They were great.
Yeah, Garrett Morris was awesome.
But he sort of fell into that the same way we fell into Sesame Street. And the way Torque, one of the original monkeys.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I met him before the monkeys became the monkeys. And they were all they took these 4 guys that didn't know how to play instruments, and they screened them for personality, and they put them together into a room and said, okay, play your instruments, and if you can't, make it look good, and we'll dub music in.
Right.
And they did that until they figured out how to do their...
Faked it until they made it.
Faked it until they made it. But...
So you two have had quite an eventful life. You met a whole bunch of celebrities. Did you ever get starstruck? Did you ever meet anybody and you're just like, ah, blah, 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 blah?
I thought actually when the kids started doing films up here, one of the second film that BCDF did, I didn't work on. I wasn't working in film yet, but Jane Fonda was their lead in Peace, Love, and Misunderstanding, and I guess it went back to my old political days, and I was so excited to meet her, and there was nothing. I mean, it was really interesting. There was just nothing, So
What do you mean there was nothing? No nerves? No.
Well, it was just there was no chemistry. There wasn't any. I thought we were going to be sisters.
Right.
This gestalt of we were always connected together without ever having met.
Sure.
And I've met so many A-list actors at this point, and they're just all people.
Yeah.
They're just all the same people. They were in the right place at the right time. Some of them are fantastically talented.
Right.
But they're just people. I'm not starstruck. I have to say, I love my local actors here because they are so grateful to be working in the industry and to be doing stuff up here. The fact that we've been able to bring so much movie making up to the Hudson Valley has been amazing.
And who's we? How has that happened?
In fairness, Laurent Rainto
Laurent,
is responsible for so much of that energy.
And who is he?
Laurent is the Hudson Valley Film Commissioner.
Okay.
And between Laurent and the Woodstock Film Festival, and it's really drawn. It's funny because I got involved with a political campaign a couple of years ago, and I went to this reception, because our candidate had won the primary. And I walked in there and I realized, wow, all these people are part of my tribe, but I don't know anyone, because they're in an area like the Hudson Valley, there are the politicos, and there are the artists, and there are the film people, and there are the writers. And, people kind of tend to gravitate, toward each other. My sister moved up here, and now she's part of the Bard Choir group.
Right.
People...
So it expands your circles a little bit more.
Oh, it does, but...
And how did you all get up here? How did it happen that you came from the city north?
Well, we raised our kids in Westchester, in Larchmont. We both on City Island in the Bronx, where we had a lot of mafia.
There it is.
No, we lived,
now, it's okay for her to bring it up.
Well, we lived in Manhattan. We lived on the Upper West Side at the beginning of Sesame Street. So we lived on West 79th Street, and Sesame Street was being filmed on West 81st Street. So we could literally
That's convenient.
We could walk to work, which was
right.
just phenomenal. And then Amy met somebody that she really liked and encouraged us to move to City Island, which is this little island in the Bronx.
Have you ever been to City Island?
No.
One of the goofier
It's kind of
places.
silly island.
I know of it. I always wanted to go.
It's
I never
adorable.
have.
It's adorable.
But while we were there, we had our next door neighbors were our best friends. We owned an antique store together. Richie DePiro owns the Black Whale there, and so we lived there for 15 years, and all of our children were born there. And then the mafia started getting involved, and it became really dangerous at certain points without my going into it and making... I mean, Amy's already breaking out in a rash.
Yeah. He's taking off another sweater.
I'll be naked soon.
Yeah, keep talking.
And she's only kicked me 5 times in that one place. But at any rate, we decided that for schooling, we needed to go to Larchmont, where the schools were better, and also to kind of get away from this toxicity. So we moved to Larchmont, where our kids went to school, and everybody graduated from school there. And then when they were all out, Amy and I were looking around, and she said, I really want to be in the country. And so we asked our kids, do you have any interest in staying in Larchmont? And they were all in college, and they said, no, we're on our way. We're doing what we're going to do. You do what you want to do. So that was 20 years ago. And then they blew up our buildings in Manhattan. And that sort of sealed the deal. I just went, this is
Yeah, we
way
moved
too
up here right
toxic.
after 9/11.
Okay.
Because we had a lot of
That was it.
people in our community that were killed, and
It was really the
Hey.
Richard was the
and we
only
had been
artist,
writing
yeah.
we had been writing children's books during that period, and one of the books that we wrote is a book called Firehouse Dog, which was about a Dalmatian living in a firehouse.
I've seen that. I know I've seen that book.
Yeah, that book is in like every school in America.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I probably have a copy of that at home.
Hutchings' greatest hits, that and
That's-
picking apples and pumpkins.
So good.
But when I did that book, Amy and I would write it together, but I would basically do the photography. So I spent a lot of time at this firehouse in Brooklyn, and I met all the firemen. And a lot of the firemen that were in that firehouse also worked at other firehouses in Lower Manhattan.
Right.
Well,
And I also got an education about what it's like to be a fireman because I spent nights there also. And
they called Richard the White Cloud because every time he was there was no fire.
The white
as
cloud.
soon as I left, there would be a fire. So they would encourage me to leave early so that they didn't get calls at
something to
3 in
do.
the morning. But the one thing that I knew was that these are the bravest people that I ever met. They would pull up to a fire in a building that was fully engaged. There would be flames pouring out the front door, and these guys would strap on their equipment and run right through the flames and not even blink an eye. And so I knew when I saw those buildings, 9/11, when I saw the World Trade Center coming down,
Right.
I knew that while all those other people in there were running down the stairs, these guys had 80 pounds of equipment, and they were running up those stairs. And I knew that, we were in Manhattan, and I had my camera equipment. And Amy said, "Do you want to go down and photograph this? Because I think this is really something." And I said, "Yeah, it's going to be a tragedy, and we're going to lose a lot of friends." And
That was
Oof.
so
that was a rough day.
the one of the follow-ups to this was that I got so many cards and letters from schools where the children wanted to know whether or not the firemen in this book were all safe. And it's the only time that I ever did like blanket lying,
Oh.
where I just, everybody was fine. But, I think that there were like 6 guys
It was
in
just-
there that didn't make it, and I just couldn't figure out a way to make it palatable on any level.
Right.
Our books were for 4 to 6-year-olds.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't like the audience was old enough to.
So you moved further north to the countryside. How did you choose Rhinebeck?
Well,
Our children will have to tell you that.
Okay, when I have the 3 boys on, which would be a blast. Oh my God, that would be so much fun.
Well, they would get to talk about us. Which,
Yeah, that'd be nice. All right, I'll save that question for them.
no,
that's
but it's,
that's a very good question for them
it
because
has actually been. We've been here almost 20 years, and it's been one of the most wonderful periods of our lives.
Were you doing some casting prior to moving here?
Well, I was casting. I cast.
yeah, we
Richard
probably produced 200,000 or 300,000 photographs,
over the years.
and-
we had worked
Okay.
really hard to be.
and
able
Amy
to,
did all the casting for
Gotcha.
those.
Yeah,
and
I
most of the
probably cast
locations and-
100,000 models at least.
Oh, my
for
goodness.
photography, but the whole thing has been. Peter was doing his first film, and he called me and he said, "Mom, this actress just canceled on me. Do you think that you could come and just play a casting director?" So I went and I was with Zosia Mamet and, playing a casting director who was being annoyed by her for this little film that he was doing.
That's so fun.
And then he said, "Mom," he said, "I need some background people for a scene. I have no money. I have no budget for this, blah, 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 blah." And, there I was. I just pulled together people because I know how to find people.
The first person she ever cast was James Earl Jones. So,
That was for
for
Sesame
Sesame Street. So, she. She's always, from the minute that I met her, she had chutzpah. And
James Earl Jones. Now he did the
was Darth Vader.
He did the alphabet for Sesame Street.
Everyone did the alphabet for Sesame
Oh my God! I actually have this. I put it up on my blog because I saw it somewhere. I'm like, that's the most beautiful thing. His diction, it's like A, B,
He has
like
a voice.
everything was perfect. It's just track it down if you're hearing this.
Yeah.
James Earl Jones doing the alphabet on Sesame Street. I did not know that everybody did the alphabet.
Well, I mean, it was everybody did the alphabet pretty much.
Right.
When they came on.
some of the opportunities that we had, which I think were great, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on that word, but was...
Oh, I forgot to tell everybody to turn off their cell phone.
Oh, and actually...
That was
I-
Jacob. We could
What I
just,
wanted
Jacob.
what I wanted
Listening
to say
live,
is
saying, "Stop it."
you asked before, you said, how did we decide to come up here? And what I was going to tell you is that it had an awful lot to do with intuition. And I said, but I hesitate to talk about intuition because when we were talking about Jacob before, I hesitate to think about Jacob because when I think about him, he calls me. So we've been talking about him. Of course he's going to call, like...
That's so wonderful.
It's wonderful, but it is...
But not as much of a connection that way on an intuitional level with the other.
absolutely.
All of them.
Yeah. No.
But and
Well,
I
I
think
pray
that
the phone rings 2 more times in the last
I turned it
7 minutes here.
oh my goodness.
You know what? I just hope that everybody can. So we're in our mid-70s now.
No.
Yeah, I
have to say
right.
that. Yeah.
Oh, no.
It was part of the contract with them. I have to say that.
But I hope that everybody can live their lives without regrets and without worrying. Because what I find is that people they're all losing the moment, and they're all worrying about what's coming, and they're just, why didn't I do this? And I think that what we have learned to do is just say, this is such a sweet spot right now. We're healthy. We have work, we have play, we have, our family is doing well. Nobody's rich, but everybody is satisfied.
Right.
They're doing good work and creative work.
And that's
the
what
Hudson
it's all
Valley-
about.
It is. And the Hudson Valley encourages that.
Can I get back to a superficial story?
Oh, please do. Thank you.
So at one point,
what happened? If he brings up the mafia again.
no. For a period of
Volkswagen Bug.
2 years, I photographed Bill Cosby and Rita Moreno.
Remember the electric
2 or
company
3
when you were a little kid?
Oh, yeah.
2 or 3 times a week. And during that time, Bill Cosby and I were never on the same page. He didn't like me. I could never figure out why it was. And then Morgan Freeman came on the show, and we became really good friends. And Morgan was a delight, and one of the super people that I have met.
He is a prince.
He was.
of this.
I've met a couple of really phenomenal people in my life who were unexpected. One of them was Ed Bradley, from 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
But Morgan is that kind of person. He's authentic and loving and nice. And
He's making a sculpture. This is,
I know
this
he's
is
making a
artist.
chair.
Look at
It's
him.
gorgeous.
Norm is making a chair out of the wire from the top of the champagne
Yeah, that wire
bottle.
has a name. I'll bet Matt knows what it's called. Yeah. But go on.
But the artist
So-
in him, the sculptor, is... I'm sorry.
Well, it's because because growing up in Idaho, I didn't have very much experience with ethnic diversity
Right.
because there were like 9 black people in Idaho.
Right.
And they didn't live in my town. The ethnic diversity basically was there were a lot of Hispanic people that came to pick the potatoes every fall, and then they were gone. And so that was my image. So working with Rita, who is a phenomenal woman, and with Morgan, I learned more. And these people were so patient as they sort of introduced me to different aspects of their culture that I never would have known. And I think that that was what I was looking for when I left Idaho, is I was looking for the real story behind people and ethnicities that I had just been told as a child growing up, that this is, you can expect that all black people are lazy.
Right.
Would have been like the kind of thing that I might have been told by an uncle or an aunt.
You know what? I was a child of the 60s and 70s, and those were stories, stereotypes, prejudices that were just out there. You'd hear all sorts of horrible things.
But how incredibly wrong, and how thrilled I was to find out how wrong I was. Because then I could open up to and understand so much about so many of these different cultures. And at this point, it doesn't matter what culture it is. It's all exciting. I don't care whether you're from Togo or Timbuktu. Well, actually, they're right next to each other, so no, I made that up.
I was going to say you're one of only 3 Americans who know that. We're horrible at geography. Well, so, I mean, it sounds like leaving Idaho was a wonderful thing for you, and you left because you wanted to expand your thinking and your horizons, and you did. When you two look back on your lives, you said you didn't want to have any regrets, but everybody has some. Are there any major regrets? Any things you think I might have done that differently?
I could have married a dentist.
Harry, look at your teeth; they're perfect.
I could have been a dentist.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's interesting because one of the things that we've gotten involved in. Have you been to Spa 21?
Yes.
Okay, because that's my new obsession. I love it so much that it just makes me feel like I'm going to live to be 150.
Because of the services they have. Yeah. You want to do a plug for Spa 21?
Well, they're actually changing. Yes!
Let's hear it.
They're actually changing their name in January.
Okay.
To Origins. Origin Wellness.
Origin Wellness?
Yeah.
Huh.
Because the concept, it's a French concept spa, and the spa means something different in Europe than it does here. Here it seems like manicures.
It's more of a health wellness thing.
Total health and wellness.
And I went there one day. They had an open house, and I did like a cryogenic kind of a cryo bath, I think they call it, which was scary but interesting. I did some like bed that gently rocked and stretched you. That was fun. But they've got all kinds of things that are
fabulous,
focused on health.
Yeah. I do this thing that's like a sound focus machine, and I feel like it flushes all of the junk out of my brain. That's why I'm so smart.
That's why she won't talk about the mafia in public.
And you will. Because you should try this machine that flushes the crap out of your head.
I'm afraid to do it because I'm not sure what'll be left.
I could totally use one of those machines myself.
Anyhow, I'm excited about that.
And your Facebook thing says that you're a part of the Arthropedia Foundation?
Anthropedia.
Yeah.
Anthropedia is just an amazing organization. It's really changed my life completely.
And what is it?
It's basically a well-being. It's kind of like connecting the parts of you so that we're not all fragmented. It's connecting your thoughts with your feelings. In a more transcendent way. So it does bring in the spiritual aspect of whatever that is for each of us.
It's a very sophisticated educational tool.
I mean, it's
as well as a philosophy that is predicated on well-being. It sort of is one of the among the many things that it tries to address is how do you get people out of depression and negativity and in a meaningful ascending way that's not that doesn't require drugs or
Right.
years of therapy. And I mean, it was designed by therapists and by a medical community and an intellectual, philosophical community that's really incredibly gifted.
So I'll give you an example.
It's complicated.
But
is
I'm going
what
to give
we're
you an
both
example.
getting
Okay.
Okay. So Richard and I both went through all this coaching training. Neither of us went on
That's
to
one.
become
That's one
coaches.
aspect that they do.
Yeah.
Is
Okay.
So
coaching.
my closest friend is a man who lives in Berkeley, and he was very depressed. And I suggested to him, I said, your gift is culinary arts. He is. He's a chef. He's graduate of Culinary Institute here.
But he retired.
He retired, and he just crashed when he retired. And he started cooking for the homeless in Oakland. He just did something like 800 Christmas meals for them, and it completely lifted him out of his depression. And my feeling is if we do something for someone else, if we work in the service of other people, that's going to keep us from, cogitating constantly on our own,
It's the best therapy, really.
It is
I
the
think
best
I
therapy.
think Gandhi said something about that. The best
Gandhi
way
is a big
know
guy.
yourself is to give to others.
Yeah.
Is in service of others.
Yep.
And on that note, we're out of time.
No.
You two
We have
are
so much
the
more to say.
bestest. Thank you so much. Such wonderfully positive people. I love the way that you compliment each other throughout this, and your kids,
Sometimes
who
we
are
even compliment
who are wonderful.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being here, Amy and Richard Hutchings.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening, and Happy New Year.
Happy New
Yeah,
Year.
Happy
it's
New
going to
Year.
be a good year.
I usually interrupt her a lot more. I've really been being very good.
And thanks Patricia Wind and the Epicurean and Matt Rosenberg and everybody for making this possible. Good night.